Okay, guys. Okay, so number 25 was The Vanished Bride. Now, I didn't realize that this was going to be a series until I got the book. For whatever reason, I think this was one of the ones that, you know how Amazon says, if you like this, you'll like this, and it gives you all these suggestions, kind of. I'm a sucker for that, and I have a tendency to buy based on the covers. So I have a lot of books that are on my to be read list because I was obsessed with the cover. So this just looked really interesting. And then I find out, even more interesting, it is a Bronte Sisters mystery. So the premise of this series, which I absolutely am obsessed with, the author's name is Bella Ellis, is that you have the Bronte sisters, which there are 3 of them, and they form their own detective agency, and they start solving mysteries. And so this is the first one of the series, right? And so I read this one, completely obsessed now with that. And then I really want to get into also reading. I've got to read all the Bronte books, which I've only read. Jane Eyre was one that I was obsessed with. I did read Wuthering Heights. Wasn't one of my favorite books, but I need to read it again. I do have a Chiltern Classics copy of it. So when I go to read Jane Eyre, I'll probably read Wuthering Heights with it. So that's on my list of things to do this year. Now, with that being said, there are 2 more in this Bronte series. So I've got to read those too. Because remember I told you I like to read things in order. So Bella Ellis has these 2. Now, what I don't like is that they're a series. But look at this. Okay, on my shelf, I hate this. This makes my OCD go crazy that they're different. I love that they repackaged them, but I wish that I could get a copy that matched this one. So if anybody knows of where I can get a copy of The Vanished Bride that matches these 2, I would be forever thankful. Just comment and let me know, because I'm obsessed with making sure these match. Totally crazy. But anyway, so these are on my list of to be reads this year. Okay, so this is number 25. And it's a cute little mystery. It's like a locked room mystery that you have to figure out, and it bounces between perspectives of the sisters, which is really cool. Which Emily, Anne, and Charlotte. So Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte. Okay, so the next book, y'all, I didn't read it. I was in my criminal justice class, and I started reading this book for criminal justice, and I got caught up on my homework, and I didn't read it. So I've got to come back to number 26, which is Blind Injustice by Mark Godsey. It's a book I've been wanting to read for a while. I have a lot of books that go along with my criminal justice major, so I'll come back to it. Number 27. Okay, guys, I read everything. So this was one that my dad got me because he knows I'm Outlander obsessed, and I love Sam Heughan. He's like one of my favorite human beings in the world besides Keanu Reeves and Drew Barrymore. And so Sam's book, I have his whiskey, I have his tequila, I have his Clanlands book with Graham McTavish, and I watch Outlander. I have all the Outlander books. I'm a Diana Gabaldon fan from way back, which if you want to see, it's like there's a whole shelf of proof up there. That's my Outlander shelf up there. I gotta move them around. I'm gonna be rearranging a little bit. So anyway, I got his book, and if I wasn't obsessed with this man before, reading this book just makes me love him even more. He is such a good human being. Like, the passion and the depth to his character, like, it comes through. And he's, not a whole lot of actors can write. Now, I don't know. I need to do some research, and I'm really thinking he wrote his own book, because it is in his voice. Now, granted, that's what ghostwriters do, is they write it in their voice, but I really think he wrote this. But I got to research it and find out if it was written by a ghostwriter, if it was written really by him, because I heard it when I was reading it, I heard it in his voice, which is super sexy, by the way. But yeah, anyways, I loved the story. It was his whole journey along. He's actually a hiking freak. Like, he loves to hike everywhere. And it's his journey, it's his story of his journey into acting, how he got into acting, and how his trials and tribulations and everything, his ups and downs in acting, but it's also placed along the lines of this 5-day journey of this hike through Scotland. Evidently, there's this trail that everybody takes, and it's his day-to-day trek on this hike in Scotland. And one of the things that I'm totally obsessed with is I am going to make it to Scotland at some point. Anyway, so I read this and I was just like, okay, that just makes me want to go even more, because the landscape, and the only thing is the weather. I'm not a cold weather person, and I don't like rain very much, and it rains all the time. Kind of reminds me, like when they describe it, it kind of reminds me of Seattle, which I've been to Seattle. Luckily, when I went, it didn't rain, like, but maybe 2 days of the 5 days I was there, so it was like completely gorgeous. So I imagine that's probably what Scotland is like, only colder. So I don't know. Anyways, I'm totally obsessed with this book. I highly recommend it if you like him as an actor, because he's very empathic when he acts. Like, you can see it in his eyes. He embodies the character. He acts with the emotion of what he's portraying, and it comes through the screen. Like, oh, anyways, so it's all in the book if you guys want to know his story and learn about him. So that was book 27. This next one, book 28. Oh wait, did I skip some? No. Okay, I thought I did. Wait, hold on. I skipped something, didn't I? Oh, okay. I jumped pages. So after the Darcys, the book 23 and 24. Okay, I skipped a couple. These were 2 that I got from my Facebook page that were highly recommended. Midnight Library, which they were mixed. Okay, first off, books that are super overhyped, I have a tendency to wait on getting them, just because I don't like to consider myself somebody who's trend following, I guess, per se. However, eventually I'm sure I'll fall into the trend, and I'll end up reading it or buying it or going to see the movie or whatever the case may be. So I broke down. I finally got Midnight Library, and there's been mixed messages. I mean, some people hated it, some people liked it, some people absolutely loved it. I'm one of the people that absolutely loved it because it hit home for me when I read it. It just, the story is about kind of the main character being at her last like breaking point, and it was giving her the infinite possibilities of redo, like the do-over in her life. And it really makes you think, I think, because a lot of the things that I thought I would do over, when you get older, you realize that everything leads you to that point for a reason. You're there for a reason. Everything leads you to that point for a reason. And without it, you wouldn't have gotten to that point. So it's those struggles and those trials and those tribulations that leads to you being able to overcome them and you being able to be as strong as you are, and you being able to develop those character traits that you needed to be able to move forward. So this one really hit home for me, and I really I recommend it. It was really touching. Okay, and then I read Happiest Man on Earth, and oh my god, talk about two emotional books right back to back. I absolutely loved this book. Um, the courage this man has to share the nightmare that he lived through. It was just amazing. And yes, I get emotional because I'm empathic, and like, I don't know, lately, I think after the lockdown, I'm more of a crybaby now. Like, I don't know why, but I can cry at the drop of a hat. So anyway, so I bawled through this whole book. I'm not even gonna lie. Straight up bawled through this whole book. But at the same time, absolutely loved it. So it's a quick read, but it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful story, and I think this should be a must read for everybody. You know, like it's I need to make a list. I'm gonna make a note. My top, I don't know, 10, 15, whatever books that I think you have to read in your lifetime, and this is definitely one of them. Okay, so that was number 23 and 24. I skipped over. And then 25 was Vanished Bride. 26 I didn't read, sorry. I'm going to come back to it. 27 was Waypoints. And then Franny and Zoe, y'all. Okay, so the story with this one, I'd never read Salinger. You know, it's one of those ones that you think you're going to read in high school. I didn't. For whatever reason, we were reading other things. So I never got into this one. And so, one of my favorite holiday shows to watch on Netflix, is Dash and Lily. And there's two books that I ended up getting because of that show. One of them is this one, and the other one is this beautiful copy of the Mrs. Basil. In the show, if you guys have seen Dash and Lily on Netflix, she talks about Mrs. Basil and I can't remember the whole name of the book, but something about like from the files of Mrs. Basil, blah, 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 whatever it is, whatever that book is. It's a children's book, basically, and it's about these kids that run away and camp out in the Metropolitan Museum. And so they sneak through and get around the security guards, and it's them basically in New York City living in this museum, right? And so they talk about it in Dash and Lily. And then also the way that the two meet is it's a scavenger hunt from the Strand in New York City, which I'm obsessed with New York City. Y'all find this out later. And her favorite book, the main character's favorite book, is Franny and Zoe, and she puts the beginning book of the scavenger hunt next to Franny and Zoe, and then she connects with Dash over this book. Now, okay, I read it, and my first impression makes me so jealous because it's exactly how I picture intellectual New Yorkers that live in New York City. Like the main characters of this book are these two kids that are, I think they're 2 of 8 in this family of prodigies, right? And they're on this like as kids, and it takes place in what, like the 1950s, I think. I want to say it takes place in the 50s. And all the kids are introduced to show business through this quiz show. And this particular family is notable. I lost the word. It came in one ear, out the other. Anyway, they are notably brilliant kids. Okay, that's not what I wanted to say, but that's basically the storyline. And they're the 2 youngest. Franny and Zoe are the 2 youngest. And Zoe is having, not Zoe, Franny. Zoe's the boy. His name is actually, what's his full name? Zoe's the nickname. His full name is, I can't remember his full name. Anyway, that's his nickname. And for some reason, I kept thinking it was two girls, but Zoe's the boy. Franny is the youngest sister. He's the youngest brother. They're the two younger kids of the 8 kids. I think the oldest one committed suicide. They're dealing with the grief of losing one brother to suicide and one brother to war. And their parents are kind of wackadoo. But again, they're super, super smart. And the problem with being super, super smart is that they're spoiled to this lifestyle of intelligence. And so everything else seems boring to them, or seems fake, or seems put on. And they're in college, and they're dealing with having to try to fit in with normal people, I guess. And it's how they're dealing with it. And Franny has gone kind of a religious route, and Zoe is trying to help her deal with this like mental breakdown that she's having. And it's a very intellectual book, but again, my takeaway from it, besides the religious aspect of it, which I find is intriguing, because I'm back in school, and I happen to be going to a faith-based college. So I part of my curriculum, I had to take New Testament, Old Testament classes, and I've always been kind of obsessed with studying world religions, not from a religious aspect and that I'm overly religious. I am spiritual, like I do believe in higher power, and I have been raised in a Christian-based religion, but I also grew up in Louisiana, where there's influences of woo-woo and, just all kinds of different things. Like, I do believe that there's other things out there that we can't explain. So anyways, so I've always been kind of intrigued with studying world religions. So anyway, part of this book was intriguing to me because of the religious aspect of it. But it's religious from an intellectual aspect, which I thought was intriguing. And it's them discussing that on an intellectual level and coming to a conclusion where you're just like, oh my God, that applies to everything. So it's very eye-opening at the same time. But again, my takeaway is this is why I'm jealous of New Yorkers. Like, this is almost like the epitome of how I would have pictured intellectual New Yorkers. Like, they, are exposed to so much culture and so much, it's almost like, here are these kids in Dash and Lily, and they grew up talking like Franny and Zoe, and it's because they're in New York and they're exposed. It's like who you surround yourself with, and your intellect grows by who you surround yourself with. So if you're surrounded by people who are older than you, obviously your vocabulary and your intellect and you grow up faster, right? And so I think kids running around New York City have an advantage over, and granted, I grew up in a city, but not a big city, right? I mean, Austin's a city, but it's more like a hometown, it's like, I ran the streets in the 80s and 90s, but it wasn't the same. It's not like I was running around New York City, right? I wasn't going in and out of museums, and wasn't going to the opera. And yes, I've gone to the opera, but, as an adult, not necessarily, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's, anyways, I could go on and on forever about it. But anyhow, this was short read, my first Salinger. I probably will check out a couple of his others, just because from an intellectual aspect of it, and again, from me being obsessed with New York City, I probably would stalk him as an author. So anyways, okay, so that was Franny and Zoe. This is what I ended the year with. Y'all, I came across this book by accident on Facebook. It is a memoir, right? And it's called 84 Charing Cross Road. Now, again, ironically, this is about a writer in New York City who, back in the 40s, because it was during World War II, starts writing to the address of this bookstore in London, right? And so it's the letters that they write back and forth. She becomes friends with one of the clerks in the bookstore. It keeps falling, sorry. She becomes friends with one of the clerks in the bookstore, and it's their letters, their memoir letters back and forth, right? Between Helene, and I love that because the main character, Helene, that's my grandmother's name. So immediately I was like, oh my gosh, like her name is Helene. You don't see that very often. But anyway, most of the times it's Helen, but it's Helene. And okay, so I read it backwards. She read this book, this Q's Legacy book, evidently with the way the story goes. And all the books that he suggests, or all the stories that he suggests in there, is what she starts writing to get copies of. So what happens is she's a writer, she's a script writer in New York City, and she's working, and it's easier for her to write to London, have them search for these copies of these stories that she wants, than for her to go across town to try to track them down herself, because you would have to go to different locations. And this particular London bookstore advertised being able to find antiquarian books, and I just thought it was so heartwarming, like the story. It's because it's a true story, and so you get to know it's like characters, but they're real people. And so it's just lovely. It's such a lovely little tale. And I know it's a short little book, but I was reading it. I actually read it out loud and got so into it that by the end of it, I was like invested. Yes, I cried, but I'm not going to tell you why, because, you'll find out. But I highly recommend. This is another book that I would absolutely obsessively say everybody should read. If you're into literature, and that's another thing too, is now this one's probably going to be a bucket list, because I've got to read not necessarily all the stuff that she talked about, because she mentions a ton of different things that I have absolutely no idea about. And she didn't read like fiction. She read a lot of nonfiction, and it was like essays and excerpts and conversations and that kind of stuff. So she had a lot of compilations and poetry and different things that she was asking for them to find, which is really amazing to me too. And again, it goes back to how I have this literary picture of people in New York City just absorbing books and being so much smarter, and having that advantage. I don't know. I mean, I could be the same person, just read more, right? But it just makes me so jealous of New York City, because that's the way I see it. And I've never been to the Strand. I've been to New York City twice, but both times were really short visits. One was for work, and one was just to pick up my cousin from New Jersey. So I flew into New Jersey to pick her up, and because she was a flight attendant at the time, and she needed an extra suitcase to carry all her stuff back home. And so I flew in with an empty suitcase, and she filled up my suitcase with her stuff. And then we had time to kill before we were flying back out. And so we took the train into the city, basically got to hang out in Times Square for a little while. Absolutely fell in love with it. It was like Hicks in New York City. It was so crazy. We're running around Times Square, and we're both from Louisiana, like originally. And I'll never forget, we look up and we're like, oh my God, there's a crawfish on the side of that building. We need to go see what that is. It's a giant crawfish. And we run over there. And it's a freaking Red Lobster, y'all. Like, not even gonna lie. We laughed forever on that. We were like, oh yeah, that's some Cajun stuff right there. Yeah, so that was pretty funny. But anyways, and then the second time I was in New York City, it was for work. And so I didn't really get to do a whole lot of sightseeing. I got to see a few things, got to do a few things, but I didn't really get to do the literary booky stuff that I would love to do. I didn't see all the sites. I didn't get to go to the Strand, which is one of the major things that I want to do in New York City, is go to the Strand. I want to do the whole serendipity, big cup of hot chocolate, that kind of thing. So anyways, yes, again, obsessed with New York City. So, okay, so that's my recap of 2020, 2022, and then we're going to start 2023, and I will include you guys in for that ride.